All right. Welcome. I'm excited to jump in today. This is my first podcast, actually ever. So I guess I don't know quite what I'm doing, but this has been a long time coming. I've been telling people for a long time. I was like, I need to start publishing. I need to start getting, I guess, my message out there. I feel like I've had a unique experience in life and a unique perspective, and it's felt like a thing I needed to do for a long time, but I guess I just have never either felt prepared enough or felt like I had the right things going. And today I just decided, you know what, I just need to pull the trigger and just go for it. So that's me doing this. All right. Well, I guess first things first is, what is this podcast? This is a podcast for the young and the motivated. I like to say. So this is for people that really want to make a big impact in the world and really want to dig deep and find their passion and do big things with their lives, and are looking to be surrounded by people that are also trying to do the same. I'm currently 23 as I'm recording this. I haven't changed the world yet, but I've done a lot of things that maybe a lot of people my age haven't. I've had a different kind of, I guess, high school experience, college experience than most people. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. I hope to bring some people in. I've been surrounded by just amazing influences my entire life, of people who have done amazing things, and many of them were teenagers, or many of them were just young people that were motivated and wanted to do something different. Didn't want to, I guess, conform to the standard of what everyone else expects of young people. We all know the stigmatism that and I guess I'm a Generation Z, but millennials had this forever. There were so many millennial jokes about millennials are just lazy, and millennials are this, and millennials are that, and of course, I mean, everyone's heard all the teenager stigmatisms of all these beliefs that if you're a teenager, that means that you're just inherently lazy, and if you're a teenager, that means that you're just inherently moody and no direction, and you just want to party, and that's all you care about, and that's just that's what society kind of places on youth generally, and people that are young, is that they just haven't got their life figured out, and they low expectations, and I kind of want to change that. So I want to tell you my story. I was born in '96, so yeah, because I'm 23 years old, and my family is quite unique. I come from a family, as of now, there are 15 kids, 13 of them living. And that alone always set me apart. It's kind of hard to explain. Some people think that's just absolutely crazy. For me, I really enjoyed it. I really loved it, and I honestly wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I will tell you that there was one hard aspect, and that is, I guess, maybe an identity, an identity problem, where you are just one of the Smith boys or one of the Smith kids, and that's what I heard my entire life. Oh, you're one of the Smith boys, and I remember just always being kind of frustrated by that, because I wanted to be Brunson. Not just some Smith, or not just, somebody with the last name Smith, or just one of those kids that's in that huge family. I was raised on a farm, really small, but I learned how to, milk cows at a young age, and just my dad taught us how to work hard. I think things started being different. My parents they really tried to be different. I mean, obviously. With the way that they raised us. But one of the big things that we did that was different is that we did a lot of mixed-up education. Homeschool, private school, charter school, public school. We did all different kinds of things at different stages of our lives. So I got a really wide range experience that way. When I was 13, I started at a school called Williamsburg Academy, which was an extremely positive experience for me. In fact, I think that, they're still running today and doing great things, and that's a lot of what their mission was based on, was that people are underwhelmed in our society, that youth are underwhelmed, and their program was unbelievably rigorous. I can't explain how difficult it was, but it was very difficult for me to, very difficult for me to just try to keep up with that curriculum. I started at 13. I had to get, you had to be interviewed by the headmaster in order to be admitted. I was a little young. I was 13, and normally didn't let 13-year-olds in. But I passed the interview, and I was allowed to be a student. So I was always the youngest. And so my entire life, something that's kind of, you'll notice a theme for me, I guess, is that I was always the youngest. Everywhere that I went, everything I did, I was always the youngest. and all the groups that I was in. And so, back then I was 13. I was as awkward as anybody you've ever met in your entire life. Part of that would come from maybe not being in public school, and a lot of it came from just a natural. I don't know. I guess I was just shy, really shy as a kid. And people that know me, I tell this to people, and they don't believe me. I was like, yeah, I had trouble talking, and even like expressing myself, and like that is not you. That's not possible. But I really was that way. I had so many defining experiences, but along the way, I kind of came to find myself little bits at a time, and mostly because of positive influences. I had a few friends and a few people that I guess came into my life at the right time, and they really made a difference. Just even saying hello and even making me feel like I wasn't just some 13-year-old kid really made a huge impact on my mind. There's so many people in my life that I guess I feel grateful for, and I couldn't list them all. But really, I think that I am what I am today, and what I've done is because of just the wonderful people around me who have believed in me, most of all believed in me, but supported me and helped me rationalize my dreams and helped me to succeed. So that's kind of the beginning. About the age of 16, I was actually really close to graduating from this academy that I was attending, and there was some change in the requirements, and I found out I have to get a bunch more science and math credits due to some new state regulation. And I talked to the headmaster, and I said, hey, listen, like, I don't know if I want to do this. And and much credit goes to him. He's like, honestly, man, you're an entrepreneur through and through, and I could tell you that from day one. And I actually met him just a few days ago, and he said the exact same thing. He's like, man, I told you from the day one I met you, you'd be an entrepreneur, and you would kind of do things a little bit differently. And so I dropped out. And the funny thing is, I actually went to the graduation ceremony, and they even put my name up there and everything. But I didn't. I actually am technically a high school dropout. I started at a community college called iTech when I was 16, and I got my EMTB. So essentially, it's the baby step to becoming a paramedic. And I had some good experiences riding on the ambulance for my training. Really loved that. Immediately after that, I enrolled. I tried to enroll at a university, and they wouldn't accept me because I was too young. Again, it came back. I was always so frustrated. All growing up, I was so frustrated because people would look at me, and because of my age, and also I should mention, I don't know if I broke the 5-foot barrier. I don't know if I hit 5 feet until I was probably, 14, 15. I was always the shortest kid. My entire life, I remember that just constantly when I was growing up. All the nicknames that are always about how short I was. My younger brother, he passed me up in height when we were about 12, I guess, and I never caught up. And now I'm about an average height, but all growing up, I remember it took me years to overcome that. I always thought of myself as short, and I'd say that to people, and they're like, well, you're not short. In fact, I'd say that you're tall. All the time people are telling me that, like you're at least you're average or you're tall, but you're definitely not short. And so it's kind of funny. I had that thing. So my entire life, I think that I was trying to prove myself because I was short. I was from a big family, and I was always so young, and I had such high ambition. And I never was taken seriously for a lot of my younger years until people got to talking to me. And so I developed this habit of trying to be really impressive with the way that I spoke. I would try to I really tried to engage super deeply in conversations because I found that's what got me respect. And that's the only way that people take me seriously. And as a result, I just was a sponge for anything I was just trying to learn constantly so that I could hold an intelligent conversation. And I was also really fascinated by just everything in the world. And that's my personality through and through, is that I am just fascinated by life and by things that go on around me. So again, I'm right about 17 years old. I'd been denied before. I reapplied to the same university. It's a college called Brigham Young University, and it's in Idaho. And I got accepted in, and I jumped in, and I just went full blast. Initially, my initial degree was English because I thought, well, if I want to get places, I have to be able to write well. Again, coming back to that, I wanted to look the part and sound the part so that people would take me seriously, and I could get places and I could get connections and things. So I went full blast in that. I worked really hard. actually, there was one semester that I never had quite enough money. And so I was just always trying to make ends meet. And this one semester, I took 17 credits, I remember right. I was working 20 hours a week. I was commuting, and I also was just doing tons of things with personal goals. I was spending a few hours a day with systems. Is something I'll definitely get into a little later, about maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. So I was just running my guts out as a 17-year-old. Um, I think I was 17, maybe I was 18. Going back, actually, I need to take a step back because there's one more element, I guess, that kind of made this up. So this is a quick story. When I was 11 years old, I had a friend. His name is Dan. He came to me. He's like, "Hey, Brunson, I've got this great idea. I think you're going to love it. I know how we can make a lot of money." And I'm thinking, "Oh man, like this is." I mean, I was highly money motivated because coming from a big family, there was kind of, I never felt like there was quite enough to go around, I guess, if that makes sense. And like many people, a lot of people don't make their fortunes until they're in their 40s and 50s, and my parents were no exception to that. So things were not, we were never, it was never like we were lacking for food or anything like that. We always had the basic needs, but nothing more, was my memory. And there were times where things were, we'd kind of have like, it was kind of feast or famine, it felt like sometimes. But by and large, I just remember thinking to myself, if I want anything, I really need to go out and seize it myself because no one's going to get it for me. Like it's not going to my parents are not going to be able to buy me things. And I looked at my friends around me and some of my other family members, like my cousins and things, and it became a lot easier for them. They could just ask their parents for something like, "Hey, you want to do this?" And it was like, "Oh, no problem. We can set you up with that." So anyway, so of course, when my friend Dan comes to me and says, "Hey, I have this great idea how we make money," I was interested, but I was also a very rational person. I was kind of one of those, I guess maybe an old soul in a young body, and definitely a critic. When I was younger, I was definitely a critic. So Dan's like, "I've got this great idea. We should open a window cleaning business." And he talks about it. He gets my younger brother on board, Dawson, and they talk to me and they're like, "Hey, so here's our cool idea." And I'm like, "That's ridiculous. You won't make any money. Like no one wants you to clean their windows. That's insane." They come back 2 or 3 days later, I believe, and Dawson's like, "Hey, guess what? I made like $25 over the last 3 days." And that was more money than I'd ever maybe even seen in my lifetime, I thought. And I thought, "Oh my goodness, he made $25 in 3 days." And this is back in the days, of course, when your mom would pay you quarters for like, if you pick up all the pine cones in the yard, which takes like 6 hours, they'd like pay you a quarter. And then you go get like your gumball at the gumball machine. And so like $25 to me was just a ton of money. And my mind explodes. I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, all these different possibilities." I'm thinking of like how I'm going to buy my own car if I were to, like, anyways, you know how the imagination just kind of runs away with you just so quickly. Um, that's totally what happened to me. And I come back and I'm like, "Hey, like I want to do it." And they kind of give me a hard time, like, "Yeah, we told you it would work." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." So we go out there, and I think after one day, it's funny. So if Dan's listening to this, I guess we'll have to maybe decide on what happened here. But from my memory, we did it for a couple days, and I think that Dan just decided it wasn't for him. That's my memory of that story. But anyways, me and Dawson went on full blast. We were using buckets, those 5-gallon buckets that we found in our garden shed. My dad at one point owned a car wash, and we took some of those old scrubbers for the cars that you would like manually scrub the cars with. We took those for the scrub brushes on the windows. Then those ones that like screw into the hoses, whatever. And we have this old squeegee that's like cracked and frayed, and it's like torn to pieces, and it's like rusted all over. And the best part, and this is what was so iconic, is that we load all this junk into this little bike wagon. Those ones that hook to the side of your bike, and you can pull the 2 kids behind you in a little bike wagon. That's what we had. We had poles sticking out everywhere, and we're like, just like creaking along the road, like just going from neighborhood to neighborhood, all in like the surrounding areas. And that's how we did it, right? I remember, there were so many different things. I remember, there was a guy that, and I feel so bad for anybody that we cleaned windows for in that first year. I feel like, honestly, I feel like I need to go like bring him a cake here one of these days because, it was so bad. I think we made plenty of windows worse. I mean, there was one. I'm sure that I think we just put streaks everywhere. We just made it uglier than it was before. and this is something that I have to goes out to the credit of the good people that I was surrounded by. Um, there was somebody, and this wonderful family, and I won't mention their name because I don't know if that they would like that, but this wonderful family, they had us come back every single year and clean their windows. And there was a couple families that did this, but there was one in particular that every time we called them, they were always like, sure. And I know that we did a bad job, but I think they really loved the idea of these young people out there trying to make a way. And they were entrepreneurs, and they owned their own business, and I think they were incredibly impressed by that. Anyway, so my heart goes out to these people because they were just so kind, and always letting us come back, always letting us clean their windows, and even when our prices went up, they were like, "Oh, that's great, that's great." And and I don't think that there was times when I am sure we did not offer a fair price because we just did terrible work. But that's kind of where I learned this idea that, and I'll tell you, actually, there was one day. This was a really defining day for me where I was actually out with this. One of my cousins came to town, and we were out washing windows. There was one day that we made $150 between three of us in one day, and at the time, that was, again, more money than I'd ever made in my entire life. All in one day, I thought, money's out there just waiting to be picked up. So at an early age, that's what was instilled in my brain was money is out there waiting to be picked up. My parents were incredibly supportive and really believed in us. My dad was a little bit anal on quality. He was always really worried that we were not offering a fair price for our quality, and he wasn't wrong. And he really was. He kind of instilled into me this concept of doing the best you can do. My dad is an absolute artist with everything he does. It's not so much about the money as it's about the artistic quality of what he does, and he's more concerned about offering the best value he possibly can than anything else. So incredibly great lessons. But yeah, that one day I remember making $50. After we split it three ways, and that was, this world opened up to me, and I thought to myself, there is money everywhere when we picked up, and you don't have to be in a job to get it. You don't have to work a 9 to 5, and then as peace went on, and I'm 17, 18, right? We're going back to when I was in college. By about that time, I mean, I could make $600 a day some day, $600 or $700 a day some days. I remember on the really good days I would make that amount of money. The bad habit I did develop at a young age though was that I developed this habit of work really hard on the weekends and don't do anything else on the weekdays. or the reverse. I would go and make, a lot of money for me back in the day. Of course, when you live in your parents' house and you have no expenses, I'd go make, let's say, $700, right, in a few days. And I would not work again for maybe 3 weeks or more. And so I got really lazy in some ways. I became very hardworking, very lazy, kind of just in this polarizing way. I learned how to really buckle in and get it done when it was go time. But when I was kind of done, I just sat around and partied and did fun things and whatever. So that's the bare bone fact. A lot of people don't know that actually I was a lazy kid all through high school in that way. And people are like, man, how does he have so much time? And I also really love that. I love that badge of being the businessman, so I kind of flaunted that around. Yeah, I own my own business. And it was kind of funny because it was, me pulling around my gear on a bike, most days. So, that's kind of how I got myself through college. My parents helped me. I remember only one semester I think that they may have, maybe it was only a loan. I think they may have only loaned me. They may have paid for a few $100s of my tuition, but that is as much help as I ever got from my parents with tuition. Not that, of course, I'm in any way bitter about that. In fact, I'm very grateful. They were very supportive, and that was the best thing they ever did for me, was being very supportive. But that I put myself all through college, and then about 19 years old, I went out and I sold security systems for a summer, door-to-door sales, another very defining experience for me. And kind of learned how to be independent. I was actually, at one point, I was just doing installation, and I was traveling from city to city all across the East Coast, living in hotels, and I'd go to the grocery store and buy chia seeds and mix it with apple juice. That was my breakfast every morning. And I just do all these weird things to try to save money any way that I possibly could. And living in these hotels, and I would... The funny thing as well, and this came back the same theme, that because I was only 18, I was 18. I was 18 at the time. But a lot of people, because they're not 21, they wouldn't let me into hotels. And so I learned how to do all kinds of creative salesmanship to get myself into those hotels, and the car that I was in there just, I mean, I could have tried to sleep in it, but it would have been a mess. And, then you can't take showers and whatever else. And so all the time, people were like, nope, can't let you inside. I'd sometimes go to 7 or 8 different hotels a night until late at night, looking for any place that would take me. And then I remember one time this guy's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, hey, listen, there is nowhere else. I've been to every hotel in town. I have nowhere else. Like, trust me, like, I'm here by myself, I went on and on about it. And he's like, dude, if anything happens, I will get fired. So make sure that you keep your head down. I'm like, yeah, not a problem. He's like, no parties. I'm like, trust me, I'm not a part here. And so anyways, that was kind of my experience there. It really helped me become very independent. Learned to just manage things on my own. I just didn't have anyone. I just had to figure things out myself. And then religiously, I'm part of a church that serves 2-year missions. And that was a very big part of my life. I went and spent 2 years in Russia as a volunteer, sharing my faith and mostly just doing service work and humanitarian work. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, up until that point, it was incredibly tough. Trying to learn a different language, trying to, all these different elements that came in. And then I was in leadership a decent amount of the time there, and a lot of constant stress and pressure. And I wanted to be the best I could be. And I really was hard on myself. I mean, I really beat myself up over being imperfect in every possible way. Of course. And so that was something I learned I had to really overcome, was this perfectionism that I started to develop, was that I wanted to be the best at everything. And if I wasn't, I kind of took it personally as I was a failure or something. And when I got home from that, I jumped right back into business. I kept my window cleaning thing up and running. And then since then, I've done several different things, but I mostly in the marketing world, and that's kind of where I sit today. So that's a little bit of my story. That was a little bit longer than I remember it being. But what it came down to me, and what I've really learned over the years, and what I guess I hope to display through this podcast and to share with other people, is one. Age is not really a factor for your ability to be successful. Nor is where you were born, nor is if you're from a big family or from a small family. It doesn't really matter. It's more about, do you want or do you not? I have people, I had friends all the time. There was one in particular, I remember thinking, he said, I really want to be a millionaire. And I thought to myself, no, you don't. You want to party. And what he meant when he said, I want to be a millionaire, is I want to have $1 million. He didn't want to be a millionaire. In the sense, he didn't want to put in the work. We use that word really flippantly in our society. We say, oh, I want to be a billionaire. I want this. I want that car. I want that lifestyle. I want that girl. I want this perfect family. I want this level of happiness. And what we mean is, it'd be nice if we had that. And sure, we desire it, but to want something, I think it should mean, when we use the word want, I hope we can understand that we need to associate, I want it enough that I'm willing to pay the price to get it. Because we throw this flippantly around, and then we feel kind of picked on in life because things just don't ever seem to work out. And you had all these big wants in life, and then you end up with nothing, but you didn't really want it enough to actually do the work for it. So something that I would challenge people is, when you say you want something, be careful with that language. Don't say you want to be a billionaire unless you really want to pay the price it costs to be a billionaire. And trust me, it's a high price you have to pay. Or a millionaire, or a six-figure man, or whatever. There's a price to pay for everything, and a lot of those prices, they're definitely worth paying it, but just remember you have to pay that price. So I look forward to our next podcast. I'm hoping to get some good interviews lined up here in the future, so stay tuned, and I guess this will be kind of fun to look back maybe here in a few years and see and listen to this podcast again, and maybe see how things have changed. In the meantime, remember, dig in deep, embrace your goals, your dreams, and be willing to pay the price to get it. And that's my thoughts. Take care, guys. Bye-bye. All right, welcome back to another podcast here. I actually I sat here thinking that, what would be a really great topic, and as I was pondering a lot, Today I had a friend recommend some books to me, and I thought, that would be actually a really good thing to talk about today, is the books that have changed my life. So what I did is I picked probably the top 5 most influential books in my life. Now, these are not necessarily the books that I'd recommend to somebody, right? If someone said, "Hey, what book would you recommend?" I might recommend something very specific to that person. If I were to even publish a list of books I'd recommend, it might be different. But I think there's some ideas in here that are worth talking about because they've really built up who I am in a lot of ways. These are some of the books that have had the most profound impact on my life. So, jumping right in, I'll read through this list first for those that just kind of want to know which of these books I really feel like have made an impact. So number 1 is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Number 2 is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Number 3 is The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. Number 4 is A Million Miles in 1,000 Years by, I think his name is Dan Miller, actually. I just realized I don't remember his name very well. And then number 5 is Carry Mr. Bowditch. And the author for that one also escapes me. But that one was actually the winner of I think it was like the 1942 like Book of the Year or something for youth. So jumping in, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I could spend days talking about the impact this book has had. And it's like the book that I think is the most critical book for almost anyone to read in a world that's really demoralizing very quickly. It really has just amazing impact on bringing everything back to center as far as what really matters. What are the key things that make all the difference in the long run? It's not a book about quick fixes. It's not a book about Band-Aid solutions. It's very much holistic life problem healing. Some of the 7 habits, like, one of them, for example, the first habit is be proactive. Very, very basic concept, but the way that he's able to explain it, really, you just recognize that if you had the habit of being proactive, it would change your life. Another habit is think win-win. Same thing. You're like, oh, yeah, it seems very obvious, but when you understand that if you could make this into a daily, lifelong habit, it would completely change your relationships and your ability to negotiate, your ability to find value. So, 7 Habits is just a phenomenal book, and I'll probably come back here one of these days on this podcast and go into some more depth on some of these principles. But this is just kind of a quick overview. Think and Grow Rich is, I think, so this is, story time. As a kid, I did a lot of lawn mowing and a lot of window cleaning. And I cannot tell you how many times I'd plug this in, I just hit play. I just always wanted to be rich as a kid, right? And so I thought, if I just keep listening to the right stuff, maybe it'll make a difference, and I think it did. I'd plug in Think and Grow Rich. I don't know how many times I listened to it, but it has to be well over 20 or 30 times I listened to Think and Grow Rich. To the point that there was even whole chunks of it I could just quote verbatim because I just heard it so many times. Pretty much it was just some of the ideas. This guy, Napoleon Hill, interviewed some of the top people of his day and found some commonalities in what makes people wealthy. And a lot of it actually was great. It was a great book on leadership. It was a great book on personal development. It was a great book on understanding the psychology. It kind of just really goes on inside our own heads. So highly recommend that book as well. In fact, I'd say it's probably the baseline book for those that are trying to find wealth in their life. The Art of Learning. This is a more recent one. This one's all about the performance, the psychology of performance. For me, that's a huge thing. I had friends that read it that said that I'd recommend it, and they're like, oh, it changed my life. My friend that recommended it to me is like, oh, Brunson, this book is for you. And he was right. I almost couldn't put it down. It was so fascinating to me. And the concepts were, how do you get yourself in the right mental state for optimal performance? Because really everything is, like I said, everything is emotional or mental before it's physical and actual. And so this guy figured out how to he just really figured out the formula for learning something very quickly and becoming an expert in whatever you do. And it really is just super profound ideas that are in here. And he has who knows how many national champion and world championships to back up his claims that he really figured out how to perform at a high level. A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. This one honestly was a bit lengthy in the sense that it was a very basic idea that it took a whole book to explain, but it was a fun story. And for me, same thing, I just couldn't put it down. I was just really fascinated by this man's life journey. And I think I read it in a time in my life when I really needed to hear what he was saying. The concept was that he wrote a memoir, gained some sort of acclaim from that. And as a result, someone approached him and said, hey, we'd like to make a movie on your life. And he kind of thought, man, why would you make me my life? He's like, I woke up this morning at who knows what time and went to the microwave and warmed up some food and sat and watched TV all day and then went to sleep. Like, he said, my life was so boring. He said, no one would want to watch a movie on my life. And I mean, without reading the story too much, essentially he had the concept, well, maybe I get to rewrite my own story. Maybe I get to choose what my story is rather than waiting for, things just to happen in my life. And this totally changed his whole perspective on everything. And he went and rewrote his whole life. He said, okay, this is my new life story. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to accomplish. This is what I'm going to be. And everything was recreated in his life. And it was really profound to me to read about that. And it gave me so much, it actually gave me one of my most deeply held belief is that we hold the pen that writes the story of our life. After I read that book, that was kind of the thought that came to me was, we do hold the pen. So recommend that one as well. It's a pretty easy read. I think it's fairly entertaining. The last one it's kind of an interesting one because this is one that probably a lot of people would find surprising because it's a child's book. But same thing, I've read this book, I don't even know how many times, at least 10. I mean, 10, 15, who knows. I read this book first when I was probably 12 or 13 and it completely, I think it probably completely changed the trajectory of my life, honestly. I read it at a very critical time, just trying to figure out who I am and what I am, and that's always an age-old question is who are we? And what part of us is us, what part of our personality is who we really are. It's based on a true story of a man who lived during the American Revolution. Really something that was kind of a side note in history. I mean, of all of the crazy things that happened, he was just one of a thousand things. But what I loved was his attitude towards education, his attitude towards success. So, very quickly, I'll share a little part of this book that was profound to me. He comes from this very poor family. His father has just gone through horrible business failures, lost their ship. He was in the shipping, the shipping industry where they were doing shipping from England to, I guess the rest of the world to America and vice versa, using these old boats. And his father loses everything and reaches a point where he can't even afford to keep his own family around. And so he sends off this incredibly bright son he's just shown incredible power mentally, top of his class, and had his sights on to going to Harvard. And out of nowhere, his dad says, hey, sorry, can't afford to feed you. We're sending you to this other person's home to live there. You're going to be indentured, which is the equivalent of slavery back then, I guess, for the average person. Pretty much I think it was a 10-year or 12-year indenturement. So pretty much from the age, I think, of 12 to 24, he was essentially someone's slave. Like, he just had to do whatever they told him to do. In exchange, though, he was able to live in their home, and his meals were provided. But beyond that, he was an apprentice. It's like being an apprentice, but without the ability to leave. And a man walks in and says, shortly after all this happens, a man walks in and says, you're what we call becalmed. You had such a bright future. You had all this stuff going for you. You were just incredible natural talent, but look what life threw you just a bad lemon, essentially. And becalmed, he's like, is when you're out in the middle of the sea and the sails just don't have any wind behind them, and you become stuck, just water, just locked in the middle of the ocean with an inability to go anywhere because there's just no wind to propel you. And as he's listening, and there's an old man that's on this. He says, hey, don't worry, son. He's talking to this 12-year-old boy. Hey, don't worry, the same thing happened to me.
I had such a bright future, but just kind of accept it, move on. Like, you're becalmed. Your life is pretty much over. And then another man walks in, hears what's going on, and says, and he says, I disagree. And he said, really what it is that you are what we call, you're going to have to do what we call sail by the ashen breeze. And these oars back in the day were made of ash wood. And when he said sail by the ashen breeze, what it really meant was to row. Is that rather than waiting for the wind, you start pulling out the oars and you start moving. And you make your own wind, essentially. And this boy is really, and it's a very critical moment for him, and he hears this and it totally changes his whole perspective on everything. He goes, you know what? Like, rather than sitting here and whining and moping about how my life was unfair and how I was just given a hard lot in life, I have the power, going back to being proactive, to create my own luck, to create my own wind, to create my own future. I don't have to wait for life to create a future for me. And so he goes on, and I think he teaches himself Latin first, and then he teaches himself Spanish, then French, and then, all these different languages. He becomes an expert in all these different fields. He just learns to read and to study very effectively. And for me, this was very profound because I learned it, and that's why I really started journaling. That's why I started studying like crazy, because I wanted to be like this guy, that become an expert in all these things. And funny enough, I think that the reason I think that's had an impact on me is I look at myself now. I now speak, roughly 2 foreign languages. I wouldn't say perfectly, but I can definitely get by in Russian and Spanish. And a lot of that, I think, came from this concept of hearing about this guy who just didn't accept the normal rules for what was, for education. He said, why can't I learn it all, And he would dig into a subject like navigation, became an expert in navigation, read everything that could be found. And then he'd study mathematics, and he studied, like, everything he'd study, he would just dive in, take meticulous notes. And then after a while, he realized that a lot of people, he said, I wanted to teach the average man how to do the same. And I'm very much the same way, and that's where I think some of these ideas became planted in my mind, was that now when I learn something, like when I'm reading a book, I literally take notes on how would I teach this to somebody else. That's really what I think about when I read a good book. Like, oh man, I gotta take notes because I have to be able to teach this later. I have to be able to share these ideas with other people and inspire them the way this has inspired me. And so, funny enough, there's books like that. I really, that's one that I wouldn't even recommend to a lot of people because I don't think many people would get a lot out of it the way that I have, but it literally changed my life, this last book, Carry On, Mr. Bowditch. Anyways, there's some thoughts in there, and those are some of the things that have shaped my life. I would love to hear which books have shaped your life. You can just comment or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram, and let me know some of the books that have changed your life as well. I'd love to hear it. But until next time, best of luck, and we'll talk to you. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Brunson Podcast. Today, I want to talk about gratitude. It's been on my mind a little bit lately. As actually, where I'm staying there, we have a sign up in the living room that says grateful, and I just sat there thinking about that today. And I thought I'd share some of my thoughts on why I feel like gratitude is one of the secret weapons of success. There was a particular time in my life where I was really in something of a funk, and I just kind of felt really down about everything. Everything was bad, everything was negative, like if anything good happened, it wasn't going to last, like super, super negative mindset about how things were happening in my life. And as a result of that, I just found myself as an unpleasant person. At one point, for almost no reason whatsoever, I had a certain day that I don't even remember, something triggered it, right? Something put me into a state of just really high happiness. And I felt really just like, man, life is turning around. Life is good. It kind of snapped me out of this funk that I was in. And during all of this, I began to think really about gratitude. I'm like, it's so interesting. Like, what happens with this? Like, why am I so volatile in what I feel? I mean, there's been so many times I've really been like, man, why is it that I can have the worst day ever, and then a girl that I find pretty attractive texts me, right? Or I get like a message that's like, and all of a sudden my day is like the best day ever. It's like, I didn't like how volatile I was and how much other people affected me. I didn't like how I could be so quickly thrown around by someone else's perception of me. Especially when I was younger, I just thrived on the approval of others. It was just a huge part of what made up my self-esteem, was if people thought I was smart, or if they thought I was this or that. And I spent a lot of my time trying to impress people because I wanted that, I craved that approval so much. And it was during this particular time where I was in that rut, and something kind of just sparked in me to a state of gratitude. I realized I was like, because you don't want to have states that are like, I guess, unpredictably good, in the sense that you're letting somebody else make your day good just because they. How am I describing this? In the topic or in the case where I was talking about that girl texting me, I remember this so distinctly. Right, I'm walking, having the worst day ever. All of a sudden, I get a text message from this girl that I thought was pretty cool, and all of a sudden, my day is just amazing. Right. That alone to me just said, I was like, I don't want to be that volatile about everything. And it was just in so many different ways. And that really led me to gratitude. And as the more I began to study gratitude, and I understood it as something that is kind of maybe a law of nature. It's something that's not just a cool idea, but gratitude is like a necessary element of what gives us a happy life. I switched into this mode where I started just trying to be grateful for everything. On a daily basis, on a minutely basis. If I ever thought whenever things were bad, I would just try to revert over to gratitude. And during this particular time, I went through this phase where I really just was like, I was crying a lot, just over being so grateful for all the different things in my life. I was just in a really good state of mind. And I've carried a lot of that with me, where I remember when I was a kid, we'd watch, I think it was White Christmas, and he sings that song, instead of counting sheep, I count my blessings. And honestly, that's really what it was for me. Rather than, if I couldn't sleep, or I was restless, or if I was having a bad mood, I really was just like, I'd take a moment and say, what's amazing about my life? And the funniest thing happened though. So like the things that I was really grateful for, I genuinely feel like I became a magnet for those things. So I was very, very grateful for the financial success that I had. With the more gratitude that I had, the more it just came flooding into my life. I don't understand how that works. My theory is that it puts us into an abundance mentality where we feel like, man, I've got more than enough. Because that's how I felt. I was like, man, and I wasn't even making great money, but I could survive. And I was living in an area that was third world, and I was making more than anybody else I knew. And I was going, man, I am so grateful. And all of a sudden, things got better and better on the financial spectrum. I remember thinking, man, my physical health is so good. Is it perfect? No, still isn't, right? But it was so, so good because I can run. I can do crazy things. I did a 50-miler last year, 50-mile run. And I thought, man, like, how lucky am I that I have a body that can do that? How lucky am I that I have great strength and great power and all these different things, right? And I've really the more I thought about it, the more I really just spent time, because I don't think we really have to fake it. I think that's a big misconception of gratitude. It's like, oh, just pretend to be grateful for stuff. I don't think it's about pretending. It's about putting yourself in the right paradigm. For example, you can say, yeah, well, I guess I live in this dumpy apartment, and I've got a microwave that makes funny noises, and my fridge, every now and again, will just, like, the light just goes out on it, and it flickers like crazy, and my fridge is pretty much empty, most of the time, and I live on rice and beans and whatever. And you can have that and say, like, I'm so grateful, right? That's not going to be super effective, but I think what is effective is you start to put that into perspective. The understanding alone that if you have, this might be a not totally accurate statistic, but this is my memory. If you have a microwave, a refrigerator, a carpet on your floor, and a TV, you are in the top 1 percentile in the world of people. And I'll bet that's pretty accurate, because the majority of the world doesn't have anything. The majority means a huge chunk of the world is still struggling with starvation, right? It's the funniest thing, right? And then we put it in perspective like that, rather than saying like, oh, I'm just trying to pretend to be grateful for my microwave. You're like, no, I really am grateful, because most people would kill to have a microwave. And literally, you think about that. Most people would kill to have a refrigerator.
Most people, that would be like a dream come true. It wouldn't matter if it flickered or if it was empty. It wouldn't matter. Just to have a refrigerator, a lot of people in the world would be so grateful, because it means they can keep their food for a little bit longer, right? It means that they don't get diseases from all the food that has to be left out. The majority of the world would kill probably for the lifestyle you have. If you're even listening to this, that means that probably the majority of the world does not experience what you experience. Just the ability to even listen to a podcast shows that you're incredibly grateful, right? So, or you have a lot to be grateful for. So again, for me, it's not so much about trying to pretend. However, the coolest thing about it is gratitude becomes a habit. Gratitude becomes a state of mind where you find the good. Because you can, like anything, you can find the bad as easily as you can find the good. Every person. And we always think that it's the funniest thing, like this misconception. Like we look at people who are ahead of us, right? We look at these billionaires and these multimillionaires, go, oh man, I would kill for their life. Like they probably don't even have any problems, right? I know a lot of friends that are very, very wealthy. I have a lot of friends that are very wealthy, and I can tell you right now that that is not the case. And a lot of them were like, I would switch my life in a lot of ways for these people that don't have anything because their life is so simple. Maybe a small life equals small problems, and a big life equals big problems. Something that doesn't always have to be that way, but very much that's very common actually. So it's funny that we sit and we look around at people who have more than us and say, man, I just wish that I had that. And a lot of us also, we have that internal timer, like, yeah, as soon as I get that, then I give myself permission to be happy. Right? And gratitude is the opposite of that. It's finding joy where you are right now with whatever you've got. And as you do that, you do become a magnet for good things. And the same concept goes, I'm a huge believer in simple living. And a lot of that comes down to the worst thing ever is when we get things too easily and we just don't appreciate them, right? And I've seen this for myself. That's part of the reason that I really have held off on trying to get a new car. I could afford a nice pickup, and I choose to drive my 2004 Jeep. And I love it. I really do, and I love that car. But what it is for me is that I want to really appreciate things. I don't want to always give myself exactly what I want when I want it. And then I really focus on the gratitude. I've got so much to be grateful for. And that's not me just saying that. I really do feel that way, but a lot of that is a mindset. A lot of that is choosing to look at what's amazing in our lives. Because just by like anything else, we can find a part of our life that is better than almost anyone that we know. That might seem hard to believe for some people, but I promise you there is something in your life that truly is incredible. And when you really hone into that, it totally changes your perspective on everything. So my challenge for the day for all of you that are listening is really dig into gratitude. Take time every day to really consider what you have. You don't have to fake it. Just put it in perspective. Put in perspective what you have compared to probably everyone else out there. If you need to, go spend some time in a foreign country. I'm a huge believer in that as well. In fact, that'd be a great podcast episode. Go out and be around people who don't have what you have. And you'll find it's very, very easy to feel immense gratitude. So with that, I'll see you on the next episode.